Before any words are spoken, something already moves. An almost imperceptible silence forms between two bodies, two looks, two worlds internal. It is there, in this invisible space, that the fate of a conversation begins to be decided. Have you ever noticed how some people never seem to be contradicted? Not because they speak louder, not even because they have the best arguments, but because, before they even open their mouths, the environment around them calms down, as if the wind had died. Down, as if the water stopped hitting the bank. Others, however correct they may be, face immediate resistance. Each sentence becomes a shock. Each attempt to explain generates more tension, and, without understanding why, the conversation turns into a dispute. Even when it's not, it should be. This happens because conflict rarely arises from words. It arises from the inner state of the speaker. When we carry haste, defense, pride, or the need to win, this energy arrives before the sentence. It announces itself in the tone, in the rhythm of breathing, in the too fixed gaze, in the rigid body, and the other feels it. Even without knowing how to explain it, something inside him closes. Nature shows us this all the time. A river that runs smoothly does not cause resistance on the banks, but when the water comes aggressively, it encounters rocks, whirlpools, ruptures. Among human beings, it is no different. There is an ancient wisdom, silent, nameless, that teaches that harmonizing comes first to convince, that aligning comes before arguing, that making space is more powerful than pushing ideas. But we were taught to do the opposite, defending our position, proving that we are right, talking more when we are not heard. And so, without realizing it, we create friction where there could be passage. This video is not about winning arguments. It's about dissolving them before they are born. It's about learning to touch the invisible field that exists between you and another, and allowing that energy organizes itself. Because when this field is in harmony, words flow like clear water, and curiously, no one feels like opposing it. If, on some deep level, you feel like there is something invisible guiding your encounters, your conversations, and even your conflicts, then this video is for you. Stay here. Walk with me in silence for another stretch of this path. Before any word is spoken, there is an invisible energetic field that forms between people. It's an atmosphere, something subtle but very real, that influences deeply the interaction. This field is not tangible to the eye, but is felt in the body, in breathing, in the beating of the heart. It is silent, but its impact can be greater powerful than any speech or argument. When two people meet, they are not just exchanging words. What is at stake is the emotional state of both, the energetic state that they carry with them. When someone arrives with a closed, defensive, judgmental mind, the environment immediately becomes heavy and tense. This state creates resistance silent, something that the other feels, even without understanding exactly what is happening. Imagine two people trying to push a heavy piece of furniture. One of them is calm, serene, knowing what to do. The other is anxious, trying to push hard without strategy, without clarity. The friction between these two approaches creates resistance, a tension that only increases as force is applied in the wrong way. Likewise, in human communication, friction comes from this attempt to impose, on one side or the other, without understanding the subtle dynamics of the energy that circulates between those involved. It's as if energy is the true fuel of any discussion or conversation. And as we know, energy cannot be controlled easily. It moves, it flows, but it can also be blocked, repelled, crushed under layers of resistance. When someone tries to force an opinion, or when someone comes to the conversation already with a rigid positioning, the energy that circulates between these two people becomes trapped. And it is in this blocking space that friction begins to emerge. However, what happens when two people enter a space of genuine exchange without the need to prove anything? When they allow themselves to listen, when the state-emotional level of both is aligned, the energetic field becomes lighter, more open. There, the words flow effortlessly. Understanding begins to form even before any explanation, because the field is clean and receptive. The mind opens to possibilities for different perspectives, for nuances that previously seemed absent. That's why it's so important to understand what's happening on the field before any words are spoken, said. We are often quick to try to solve problems with arguments logical, with explanations, with words. But what is happening internally, between the energies that circulate, is what really determines the direction of the conversation. What to mind does not see, the body feels. And often it is the body that will guide the outcome of the interaction, more than any reasoning. This brings us to a crucial point. How then can we change this dynamic? How can we transform friction into fluidity, resistance into harmony? The answer is in our inner state. If we begin to adjust our internal energy, our posture emotional, before we even speak, we begin to change the way we are perceived. And most importantly, we change the way we can influence others in a silent and profound way. Deep down, what really generates friction are not the words, but the energy with which they are spoken, issued. When we can align this energy, our communication becomes more lighter, more fluid, more effective. And suddenly, the resistance that previously seemed insurmountable disappears. There is an inner gesture that changes everything, although almost no one notices it. It happens before speech, before organized thought, even before intention. Conscious. It is the gesture of emptying. Emptying does not mean giving up. It doesn't mean agree. It doesn't mean diminishing yourself. Emptying is removing the excess that creates resistance. When we enter into a conversation full of reason, full of certainties, full of ready answers, we leave no room for anything to happen. The other feels it immediately. It's like trying to pour water into a glass that is already overflowing. Nothing goes in. Everything is lost. Emptying begins when we let go of the need to win, when we relax the impulse to correct, when we put aside the secret desire to be recognized as the most lucid, the most right, the strongest. At that moment, something curious happens. The energy that once pressed now welcomes. The field between people stops being a battlefield and becomes a space open. Nature teaches us this simply. A calm lake effortlessly reflects the sky, but it only takes one stone, small but agitated, to distort the entire image. In the same way, when our mind is agitated, when the ego is on alert, any interaction becomes blurred. Even kind words carry tension. Even good intentions sound like an attack. Emptying is like allowing dust to settle. It's about stopping shaking the water to finally see the bottom. In modern life, we have been trained to always be full of opinions, full of quick responses, full of firm positions. We confuse firmness with rigidity. We confuse presence with imposition, but rigidity breaks, and imposition generates resistance. When someone speaks from a void, something disarms in the other. There's nothing to fight. There's nothing to defend. The energy finds nowhere to collide. This emptiness is not absence. It is space. It's like a clearing in the middle of the forest, a place where the wind can pass without being interrupted. And it is precisely in this space that true listening happens. Not that strategic listening, waiting for your turn to respond, but listening is not in a hurry, that you don't need to prove anything. Interestingly, when someone feels truly heard, their energy changes. The defense falls. The voice softens. The body relaxes. Not because you said something special, but because you didn't take up all the space. And this is deeply counterintuitive to the ego, because the ego believes it needs to act, respond, win, convince. But the spirit knows that often the greatest power lies in not obstructing. Emptying is a silent form of leadership. Leadership that does not push but guides, that does not impose direction but creates passage. When you enter a conversation emptied, you don't carry the conversation on your shoulders. You allow it to happen. And in this state, something almost imperceptible begins to align, as if invisible forces adjusted the tone, the rhythm, the meaning. It is from this void that the next stage reveals itself. Because when the space is clear, a simple sentence, said at the right moment, is enough to change all the energy. And it is on this phrase that we will now walk. There is an exact moment, almost invisible, when a conversation can go two ways completely different. This moment does not happen in the middle of the argument. It happens before the explanation, before defense, before the point of view. That's where a simple phrase, short, unpretentious, has the power to align everything. But this phrase doesn't work as a technique. It's not a psychological trick. It's not a manipulation disguised as kindness. It only works when it comes from the right state. When you arrive empty, as we saw before, this phrase is not thought of. It emerges. It flows like water, finding a natural opening between the stones. The sentence is simple. Something like, I may only be seeing part of this. Or maybe, I want to better understand what this is like for you. Sometimes all it takes is, maybe I'm wrong. Watch what happens when these words are actually spoken, not as strategy, but as an honest expression of the moment. The field changes immediately. The energy that was previously prepared for the shock does not find impact. The other, who was armed to defend himself, loses his target. There is no attack. There is no imposition. And interestingly, it is at this moment that resistance drops, because the other's ego was ready to fight against a rigid certainty, but find humility, find opening, find space. This sentence does not diminish your position. It strengthens her, because it communicates something much deeper than the literal content of the words. It communicates, I'm not here to beat you. She communicates, I don't need to impose myself to exist. She communicates, there's enough room for both of us here. Human beings react more to energy than to argument, and when the energy says, there is no threat, the body relaxes before the mind even processes it. That's why often, after this sentence, the other person begins to explain themselves better, softening the tone, reconsidering points that I previously defended rigidly, not because you convinced him, but because you removed the friction. This is the art of paving the way before walking. In nature, water does not argue with stone. She doesn't try to convince her to leave the place, she gets around it. It involves. She waits, and over time, the stone itself changes. When you say this sentence from emptiness, you become like this water. There is no rush. There is no need for control. There is confidence in the flow. And here's something essential. If this idea resonates with you, if something inside recognizes this softness as truth, it is a sign that a part of you already knows how to walk like this. Maybe you were just forgetful. Most people believe that respect is necessary, but true respect arises when the other does not feel threatened, and that starts before the argument. It begins with an inner disposition that translates into a few words, or sometimes just in peaceful silence. When this phrase is said, you don't give up your vision. You just postpone the need to defend it, and in this postponement, something bigger happens. The field reorganizes. The energies align. The conversation stops being a duel and becomes a meeting. That's why after that you can talk. You can explain. You may disagree. But now, the soil is fertile. Without this invisible preparation, even the best idea falls on hard ground. With it, even simple words create deep roots. And yet, this sentence is just the door. The real challenge begins when we take this stance into the noisy world, fast-paced and impatient world in which we live. It is there, in everyday life, that this softness will be tested. It is easy to understand this softness when we talk about rivers, wind, and silence. The real challenge comes when we return to the concrete, noisy, hurried, the world of instant messages, tense meetings, opinions thrown around like stones. This is where this stance is put to the test. In the workplace, for example, how many discussions arise even before the first sentence? A defensive look, a dry tone, a body leaning forward, ready to protect itself. No one is really listening. Everyone is preparing to respond. When someone arrives with the need to prove value, to assert themselves, to show competence, the energy of space contracts. The words may be polite, but something in them pushes, and push creates resistance. Now imagine the same situation with another inner state. Someone who comes in without a rush. That doesn't carry the conversation as a battle to be won. That begins by recognizing limits, not as weakness, but as humanity. Suddenly the rhythm changes. The environment breathes. At home, with the family, this is even more evident. How many old conflicts are always repeated in the same way? The same sentences, same reactions, as if everyone was stuck to an invisible script. When we enter these dialogues already armed, The energy of the past takes over. We no longer speak with the person in front of us, but with the memory of what they once were. Us. And nothing new can be born from there. Emptying breaks this cycle. When you arrive without bringing all the stories along, something disarms. The other finds it strange. He doesn't find the role he expected to play. And on social media, perhaps it is the densest field of all. There, almost no one seeks a meeting. Affirmation is sought. Opinions are thrown like spears. And every response is a shield raised. In this environment, arguing is almost always useless, because no one is listening with a relaxed body. Everyone is tense, vigilant, defending their identity. That's why, often, the best application of this wisdom is knowing when not to enter. Knowing when the field is too closed for any fluidity. Water does not force its way through solid stone. It waits for another route. But when you choose to speak, and speak from the void, something different happens. Even in hostile environments, softness creates a powerful contrast. She doesn't fuel the fire. It removes fuel. And that doesn't mean passivity. It means precision. You choose where to invest energy. You don't react to everything. You don't give let it pull for all the whirlpools. Modern life trains us to react quickly, respond quickly, defend quickly. But flow wisdom teaches the opposite. Act at the right time. When you start to apply this in everyday life, you notice something curious. Many conflicts simply stop happening. Not because you won, but because they were never born. And what happens? Last less. They weigh less. They leave fewer marks. Because you don't go into them carrying rigidity. Still, after all these external applications, one essential point remains. None of this works if there is no constant return to the center. It is there, in that silent place within you, that true harmony is maintained. After observing the world, you need to go back inside, because no external posture can be sustained if the center is forgotten. True harmony is not something you apply only when it suits you. It is a state that is cultivated, like a silent fountain that keeps flowing even when no one is watching. When you return to center, you realize that it is not the other person who needs to change first. It is your inner state that organizes the field around you. It's always been like this. There's a place inside you that doesn't argue, don't rush, that you don't need to prove anything. This place exists before words, before personal stories, before wounds accumulated. It is like a clean space, an inner courtyard where the wind passes without finding obstacles. When you act from that place, your presence changes. Your body speaks before your mouth. Your silence communicates before sound. People feel, even if they don't know how to explain it, something in them recognizes this stillness. This is why true smoothness cannot be faked. It is not external posture. It's internal alignment. Purification in this sense is not a distant ritual, it's daily practice. It's observing when the ego arms itself. It's realizing when haste takes control. It's about noticing when the desire to win begins to harden the mind. And then, let go. Like someone letting the water run after a heavy rain. Like someone opening the window to let the morning breeze in. This constant return to the center is what prevents you from getting lost in the conflicts of the world. Not because they disappear completely, but because they stop governing you. You learn to respond without being dragged, disagreeing without attacking, to position yourself without stiffening. And there is a profound difference between firmness and rigidity. Rigidity breaks. Firmness sustains. Firmness is born when you are rooted, like a tree that moves with the wind, but doesn't lose its ground. When you speak from that place, your words don't carry extra weight. They don't try to convince. They just offer themselves. And interestingly, the less you try to control the outcome, the more natural the results become. Meetings, conversations flow. Conflicts dissolve faster. Silence stops being uncomfortable. This is the sign that something has reintegrated. You are no longer separate from the flow. You're not fighting him. It's walking along. And walking together does not mean the absence of challenges. It means crossing them with less friction, with less wear, more clearly. When this reintegration happens, you realize that you don't need to prepare so much for the difficult conversations. You just need to be present, whole, aligned. Because harmony is not born from effort. It is born of return. And when you return to the center, something ancient and silent awakens. A profound reminder that living in agreement with the invisible is more natural than resist him. It is from this state that the path closes, or perhaps open up even more. Perhaps the greatest teaching of all this is too simple for the hurried mind accept. Not every strength needs to show itself. Not every truth needs to be defended. Not all silence is empty. Some battles disappear when not fed. Some resistances dissolve when they find nothing to support themselves. When you learn to touch the invisible field before words, something profound changes in how the world responds to you. People don't feel pushed around. They don't feel challenged. They don't feel obligated to protect themselves. And this doesn't happen because you became smaller. It happens because you have become more aligned. There is a silent intelligence that organizes human encounters. She doesn't scream, don't dispute, don't argue. She whispers, and it is only heard by those who slow down enough to listen. When you speak from this place, your words carry less weight, but more true. They don't try to win. They just find it. And maybe that's why so many people feel peace around someone who doesn't need it, prove anything. Because this presence reminds us of something forgotten. Remember that it is possible to exist without constant friction. No continuous fighting, no permanent defense. The modern world has taught us to toughen up, shielding us, positioning ourselves as if everything were a threat. But nature doesn't work ion like that. It flows. She gets around it. She waits. And yet, she transforms everything. When you choose this path, don't expect immediate applause. Smoothness is rarely celebrated in a world addicted to shock. But it is felt. And that's enough. Over time, you realize that many discussions no longer make sense. That some words become unnecessary. That certain silences say more than long explanations. You don't lose your voice. You purify it. And then, when he speaks at the right time, with the right tone, with the right energy. If you feel like this way of walking resonates with something deep within you, perhaps is not new. Maybe it's just a comeback, a return to an older, quieter, more natural way of being in the world, where the invisible guides more than confrontation, where harmony comes before victory. If you want to continue walking through this subtle territory, where the human meets the invisible, sign up and follow us along the path of the soul, because there is still a lot to be heard in the silence. What if what we call conflict is just a misunderstood invitation? And if what we call convincing is just noise in the face of the real alignment? What if the fate of our words was already being whispered long before they be born, by the kami who have walked with us since the first breath?